As you're adding questions to your Google quiz or assignment using Google Forms, you'll want to mark an answer key to make the quiz as self-grading as possible. Now, in another video, we looked through different question types that you could add to your quiz. Some of those question types can be completely self-grading and some cannot. So the ones that can be completely self-grading are the short answer, the different forms of multiple choice, and the multiple choice and checkbox grids that are kind of like a matching section. And even then, they can be completely self-grading, but the short answer and the two checkbox options in particular, they might need your eyes on it as well to make sure that their answer was really wrong if it marked it as wrong. Question types that cannot be self-grading at all, though you can still add them as part of your quiz or assignment, you would just mark the question as right or wrong yourself, would include the paragraph, file upload linear scale, date, and time. So let's switch over and I'll show you how to mark the answer key for these different question types. Alright, so here's our quiz with a list of sample questions. Each question looks like a white box, and if you click on any one of those white boxes, you'll see more choices, where you can change the question type, make the question required, which I usually do for my assignments and quizzes, because some students will skip questions if they don't know it, and I want them to at least try. You've got an option to delete and duplicate a question. Right now we're focused on this option down here, which is to add an answer key. If you've clicked on a question and you can see these other options, but you don't see the choice to add an answer key, you'll want to make sure in the settings up here, under quizzes, that you've turned on the option to make this a quiz. If you have, you'll see a button to go to the answer key, and there's a couple things that you want to do here. First of all, you want to change the number of points. If you use a typical percentage system and you want this assignment to be 100 points, then you would just figure out, based on how many questions you have, how many points each question needs to be worth to add up to 100. You can see a running total at the top to help you make sure you're adding up to the right number. If you use a point system, it might be an arbitrary number of points that don't add to 100. Then you'll want to go over here and mark a correct answer. Now, I mentioned before that the short answer can be self-grading, but sometimes it'll mark answers wrong that you need to put your eyes on and see if they actually are wrong. Let me give you an example. Let's say that the answer to your short answer question was something like paper, and you type that in as the correct answer. Now, when students submit their answers, if they've typed in the answer paper, Google should count it as right, but in my experience, it's possible for them to type in the word paper and Google not count it right. As of this video, which is filmed in September 2020, Google is picky enough that it needs this exact form of the word paper. If the students have capitalized the P, which in my experience, a lot of times their phones will automatically start them with a capital letter, and they'll type in the answer and it just automatically appears capitalized on their phone. Google would not accept that if you didn't have it as a second option for a correct answer. If you only had this lowercase paper, it wouldn't count this. So to mitigate that, I try to predict the different ways that students might type the correct answer and add as many correct answer choices as I can to cover it. But then if I have any short answers on my assignments, I always go through their answers and just make sure it didn't mark something wrong that shouldn't have been marked wrong. You can check this box to mark all other answers incorrect. Even if you don't check that box, it won't give them the points for the answer. If they don't have these correct answers, you would have to give them the points yourself. So that's marking answer choices. For a question like this, the paragraph question, which is a longer answer text, you can't add a correct answer, which is why I said it's not self-grading. You would have to actually look at their answers and give them points yourself. You can add something called answer feedback, and I'll show you what that looks like now. You would add in what the long answer is. You know, it might be a whole sentence or something like that. It might be the kind of answer where they could give a variety of answers that would all be correct, and you could give an example of what the correct answer is. Now, Google's not going to look at this and try to grade it, but at least the students can see and predict whether their answer might be marked right. If you've let them view their answers immediately after they submit, they'll go through and they can see, oh, I'll get the points for that answer. Another feature of the add feedback, again, this is what students see when they get a question wrong. You can add in a link or a video. So let's say they get a question wrong and there's a video on YouTube or maybe Khan Academy that you could find a URL for that explains how to do that type of question that they missed. You can search for that video on YouTube and add it in the feedback so that when they're looking over their answers after an assignment and they see they got something wrong, they could, try to learn it with that link or YouTube video. So that's a really helpful feature, the add feedback, even on questions that aren't self-grading. For the other sorts of question types, the answer key is pretty straightforward. Again, remember to go over and change the number of points so that it matches up with your particular grading system. And then for these multiple choice or these other sorts of answers, you can pick what the correct choice is. You can add an answer feedback that would maybe explain why that's the correct choice. Again, that the students would see if they got the answer incorrect. For these self-grading questions on the feedback, you can differentiate the feedback for correct answers versus incorrect. On the incorrect in particular, you might want to explain why the answer was the way that it was and give them a video to go watch that would help them learn that concept. A little note about the multiple choice questions and the answer key. You can actually choose more than one of these choices as the correct answer. Now the students on multiple choice, we went over this in another video, they can only choose one of these choices. But you can mark more than one of them as correct. And in that case, if they either chose choice 1 or choice 2, they would get the points that you've assigned. On the other hand, if it's a checkbox question and you go over to mark your answer key, given a number of points, on a checkbox question, remember that students can mark more than one choice. This might be for the type of question where you say, choose all that apply. And they can go through and they can mark multiple choices to give the correct answer. When you're doing the answer key, you would mark all the choices that apply. And if they don't mark exactly all of the choices that you selected, they won't get the points. So that's why I say the checkbox question types might need your eyes on it. And maybe if you've marked it worth 10 points and they got one of the two choices but not both, it just depends on what the assignment is. You might choose to give them partial credit if they got one but not both of the answer choices. And you'll notice there's two different views of a question. There's the view where you're editing the question and the choices, and then the answer key view where you can't edit the question anymore, and you can get out of that by just choosing done. All right, the other types of questions are pretty self-explanatory. The ones that I mentioned, again, the file upload, linear scale, date and time, you can't mark a correct answer. It's like the paragraph where you can only give them an answer feedback that they'll view after they've submitted all their answers. For the multiple choice grid and the checkbox grid, you can mark the answers. You would go to the answer key and fill in the grid, kind of like they would with what the correct answers are, and mark a number of points for each of these questions. All right, so that's the basics of marking an answer key and using answer feedback on Google quizzes.